Okay, on the end of the fuselage boom here is a raised bit for the horizontal stabilizer. Now it has a single hole in it, you can see that in the light, and you're given a small carbon peg. So I've got the underside. Effectively I'm going to be putting this on this way up so that the servo pulls the springed elevator down. So on the underside, where the two reinforced areas are, I'm starting to just drill out by hand, by turning this drill bit, the hole in the reinforced area, the back one, for this peg. I'm going to be taking care not to be going all the way through. And then once I've worked out where the screw hole goes on this side, through to screw into this part of the fuselage, then we'll know where this peg lines up in here. I don't know whether to glue the peg into there, making this removable, or put the peg in here, probably glue it into the fuselage. Okay. I decided to go all the way through in the end. I will glue the pin or the peg into the fuselage, but I'll put it in such a height so this remains just proud or just flush, because it gives it a bit more material to hang on to. I think I was trying to be a bit too clever to keep it below the level of that stabiliser. I don't think there's going to be enough material there to hold on to. So I decided to go all the way through and just have it proud a little bit. There'll be a screw head here as well, so it's not like it's not designed to have a bit of something on the top. Don't think it'll cause much resistance. So now I need to line up the screw hole into the fuselage. Just trying to guess which screw of the three goes into which of these holes, and I've decided, I think the two long ones obviously for the wing, I think probably the nylon one at the back, so any impact on the front leading edge of the wing will cause the rear one to snap and hopefully the front one will just twist. I guess that's to save the wing, it being a nylon one. And thus the short one would be for the stabiliser at the back. It is countersunk, that screw, so I'm going to have to put some countersinking into the stabiliser when I drill this hole here, which I'm going to do now. There it is, countersunk. If you don't have a countersinking tool, I just use the larger drill bit, span it by hand gently, just cut away, and now the screw head will fit nicely in there, nice and smooth. Right. So finally, something that's beginning to resemble an aeroplane. I obviously now need to get some lining up done, measuring the distances from here to the tip. Maybe even with the wings on to check the distance here to each wing tip to make sure this is in the right place, because obviously it could be on at any angle here. Get this completely perpendicular to the fuselage, before we then mark where that pin goes through, drill the hole through and glue the pin in place. Quick update, I've just taken the small piece of balsa that's for holding the servos in the fuselage, cut out two servo gaps. I've stepped them between each other just to give myself some room for the servo horns, and then in the fuselage pod I've just glued in a couple of very small supports each side to put this servo tray on. I'm not happy with just gluing the edges of the servo tray to the fuselage on this edge here. I just think it just needs a bit more. I'm not competing in F3K or anything silly, it's just how I'm going to build this, so that's what I'm doing at the moment. And there they are, glued in place, ready for the tray. Onto the tail. Now, this is going to have to sit into the fuselage, and I understand that we actually cut the tail, but not all the way up to the spar, just halfway along, a slot at the top, a slot at the bottom, to push into the fuselage. Hyperflight say take out the middle bit of the fin. It's not needed inside, but I think it would add more strength if I put glue on the inside surfaces that touch and on the external, so it'll be touching the top, the bottom and two inside, like that basically. Smack bang in the centre of the fin with some epoxy. So first things first is to get it lined up, then we need a square to make sure it all goes in completely vertical, and right, let's get the knife out. Right, I've cut slots in the fin. Have a look here, you can see there's just been cut slightly into each side. There is a carbon spar down the front edge, the leading edge of this, so you have to be careful cutting through that. I didn't know that until I started cutting. So even both sides from the top, and obviously then we've got to line it up so it's nicely in the centre. I've put the wing on the plane and I've just balanced it between two chairs at the moment, and using my phone and its level, I've rested it on each wing and got them both exactly the same, so that I know that that wing is sitting nice and square for me. So then it's a case of getting the fin square when I glue it. I'm not going to use my phone for that because the actual fin is bulged here. It's got a bulge in the centre. It's not completely flat. So if you try to do it with your phone, you can see that there's no chance I'm going to get that square. So I'm going to use my trusty square here, up against it, and then the gap top and bottom, I'll just have to try and get exactly the same. You can see there clearly the centre's fatter than the tips and the top and the bottom. So that's roughly how it will be when I've glued it. Should be square to the rest of the plane. Epoxy, I'm going to do that now. Okay. All glued in, nice and solid, nice and square, and all very happy with that. Now, I've cut the carbon horns out with scissors, and I've drilled a small hole in the top of each one of these. The two larger ones for the ailerons, the two smaller ones for the rear of the plane. I've bought some Catfish Cat Link, £40. It's like a Teflon coated, or Kevlar I believe, something clever like that. I'm going to use for my pull. It's not a pull, is it? It's a pull and spring system. I don't know what. There's nothing in the with the model. It comes with a model to use as a cable system, so you have to choose what you want to use. But doing some research, this is what people have recommended, so that's what I'm going to use. On the ailerons, obviously, it's push rods. These very thin wires that they've given you. I can't remember the drill size I used. I think it was a 1.5 or a 2mm drill. So that's the next stage, is to cut a slot into the underside of the elevator and the rudder. Obviously on the side, this side to pull it round, and on the top face here or the underneath to pull that down. And then we'll start deciding where to put the holes into the fuselage to take the cabling up to the front, and then onto the servos and the servo tray. So we'll get these cut into here. Obviously they're really thin, so there's not a lot of meat to cut into these to get these to be glued in. So this is going to be fun. I shall probably rough up this edge right on the tip here, just to make sure the glue keys properly. They're now glued in, so that's good. I've done it on the centre line for this one, and this one I've done as close to the fuselage as I can get it. Just down the edge there. Let's get a bit of camera work. There we go. So that it just comes down the edge like that. Okay. So I'll take the wing off and do the ailerons now. These aileron slots are not a case of just cutting straight down with a knife and expecting to fit it in. You will actually have to take out the width of your horn here, so literally taking the meat out to allow room to put this in. You can't just draw a line with a knife and expect to be able to push this in. You are going to have to take them out, which is what I'm doing at the minute. You can see it's very fine. Quite tough material this, so there's quite a low risk of actually going through the other side unless you really ham-fisted. One side's already done, ready to be glued, all lined up with the servo, just finishing off the other now. Servo tray is in, so ready to start threading the cable. I've decided where to put the exit holes on the other end of the fuselage and thread them through, which should be a bit of fun. Servo, the tray's just, I've just had a couple of strips which you've seen earlier that are down the sides of the fuselage, and then I've just cyanoed in the tray across the top, and I've cyanoed the servos on top. Hopefully that's going to be strong enough to hold them in place. So the cables, I've drilled the holes, one on the side there for the elevator, and one underneath, and one on the other side here for the rudder. I poked the cables in from that side and just shook it really, just shook it a lot, and they both dropped out the bottom surprisingly easy. I was expecting myself to be sitting here for hours trying to thread those, but they've actually just dropped through so easily. So I can crack on with the next bit. Fantastic. Okay, servos are in. That string on the rudder looks a little bit weak to me. I guess that's just the strength of the spring pulling it at the other end. It all works, so that's great. Onwards and upwards. Ailerons now connected up. They gave you these metal rods, but there was nothing to connect between the metal rod and the horn, or the horn at either end. So I've put these in, which are quite heavy, but big lumps of metal there. I don't quite know whether they expected you to bend something in there and bend something in there and never have to adjust it, because there was nothing in the pack with the model. So I've used these. You could use the big metal clevises or plastic clevises and get rid of these metal bars because they're not threaded or anything. So I don't know, a bit loose on there, don't like that. Might have to look at that hole or use a different piece of metal bar that's a bit thicker. I only drilled it with 1.5 or 2 mil, but not good. Anyway, that one's alright. Oh no, they're terrible. Okay, I need to look at them. And the biggest mistake, or the biggest problem I have now, of course, is I didn't think about the servo wires. They need to come out into the fuselage. So should I have put a hole through in the foam here and then let the servo wire come out here? Or do I lie them on top and then put a little indentation for where the fuselage will pass over? I don't know what to do now about that part. And that's the last bit, because after that it's just programming the radio and it's ready. I'll come back to you, and I've worked out what I'm going to do about these servo wires. Okay. I've managed to drill a hole in the centre, not going all the way through obviously, then poke a barbecue skewer through the foam from both ends, and managing to get some of the meat of the foam out from just through here is the hole. And then took the plug off the servo, and then just wrapped some tape around the end to keep them all nice and round. Poked it through, the barbecue skewer helped, and I've got one through, and I'll put the plug back on, and then I'll do the other side. Phew. And there we go. Phew, both done. So I'll put it together now. Turns out there was one more job. They don't put a hole in the fuselage for you to put your wires through. So I had to cut one through, and we're right in the mess of it. So now I can feed the wires through, but those servo leads aren't long enough to get to here, or the receiver, so I'm going to have to put extension leads on. Right, all bar the radio, these 2 servo extension leads to get to the front. Small receiver, 3-square receiver, a couple of batteries, and a beck. That's it, all ready to go, so fantastic. onto the Maiden and see how she goes.